Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of GIS Bigfoot Answers. Today what we'll be looking at is a sighting in Perth, Ontario. And that's located about an hour away from the capital city of Canada, known as Ottawa, and probably 3 hours away from Toronto. So what we're looking at is the GIS Bigfoot Answers Encounters app map, and this sighting was submitted by a Patreon, and I'd like to say thanks to the Patreons for supporting this channel. And you can have access to submit your own encounters to be featured on this channel. So if you join up with Patreon or YouTube memberships, you will get access to that. You can also send in your encounters to bigfootanswers@gmail.com. So we're going to zoom in on this sighting. And we'll have a look at the geographic area and see what we can see. So Perth, Ontario, May 1st of last year. There's an awful smell and bipedal footsteps late at night. 4 people witnessed it as we pulled up for the weekend at a cottage. It was late evening. It smelt like garbage and dead fish. Growling and squealing came from the dense forest close to the cottage. Then the animal moved along next to the cottage within a few yards of us. It was bipedal. You could hear the steps creeping along in the forest. Well, that's pretty cool. So 4 people witnessed this. A smell like garbage, and the bipedal footsteps, and the growling and squealing. It's interesting. I don't recall hearing squealing, or I don't recall hearing anything about squealing before. So interesting. So this is on Christie Lake, and the Tay River flows into Christie Lake. And it's close to Highway 7, which is a main artery in Ontario. Just a single lane highway for the most part. There are some passing lanes in some of the areas, and further towards Toronto it would get into 4 lanes. So let's have a look. The base map, we'll switch that over to satellite imagery, and as you can see, a lot of wooded area, lakes, wetlands, and the cottages are quite dense here along and around this Christie Lake, but you can see how there is wooded areas and wetlands right up between the cottages, and some areas right up against the shoreline. So right here you can see how the wetland, basically is, part of Christie Lake, right on Christie Lake. And there's a trail here. Looks like perhaps an old rail bed that's now a recreational trail. You can see how this is like a huge area right around the sighting. Let's measure this. Some residential areas as well as agricultural areas, 2,000 acres right there, easily accessible with like maybe one or two roads. And as I said before, that recreational trail which wouldn't have a lot of traffic on it. Might have a few people using it for walking and ATVs. And again, as you go west, it's another area, probably of 2,000 acres. So like a large potential area for Bigfoot to live. So some good habitat there for Sasquatch. So we're going to look at the Google Street Maps. Oh, there's the Tay River. Okay. So very nice. Look at that. But you can see how I was talking about like wetlands being along the edge of the lake, and cottages. Quite dense woods right up against the road. Look at that. There isn't a lot of space between the road and the woods, but there's the lake there. Quite nice. So you can see how it's quite wooded, and cottages and residential homes are between these various land uses. But you can see like it is really wooded. Yeah, look at this. A real mix of land uses. Just want to see what this is like up here, see if it's similar. Yeah, look at that. You can see how this would be quite squatchy. these lanes, these small roads with lakes on one side and wooded areas on the other. So here we are looking at the BFRO database and the sightings in this area to see if there's any comparables. So here's one right on Christie Lake, or around Christie Lake. And here's a sighting, possible daytime sighting by boaters and by a walker in the morning between Perth and Westport. So Westport's further to the south. Here's one in Westport. There's Westport there. Possible wood knock responses heard near Westport. Daytime sighting behind a cabin near Westport. So yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of sightings in Canada, but right in and around this area, it seems to be a hotspot. So let's have a look at report 30249, and the date was 2007. September 2007. A group of us take our annual fishing trip to a lake that is halfway between Perth and Westport in Ontario. This is Christie Lake. One of the guys, Harry, on the trip had a quadruple bypass surgery a few years earlier, and he wakes up to walk 8 to 10 miles each morning around 5:30. On Friday morning, he got up for his normal walk. While turning around the corner toward the owner's house, saw something in the darkness next to the owner's deck. He had an LED flashlight and shined it on the deck, 40 to 50 yards max. The thing was reaching over the deck railing, and upon having the light shined on it, turned away and slowly walked away from the deck towards an open field and east towards the forest, turning away from him. Harry continued on his walk. On the way back, he stopped at the deck, still very early, but now daybreak, and measured the height. Where the creature's upper thigh came on the deck was the same as his mid-chest. At this point, Harry said nothing about it to anyone. The following day, Saturday, we have our annual fishing derby, which isn't very serious. It runs from 9 a.m. to noon. After deciding the winners, which gets your name engraved on a trophy, everyone either hangs out at the cottage, goes to town, or goes back out fishing. Two of our more dedicated guys decided to go back out after lunch. The lake has a river on the opposite end from where we stay, that flows in from the southwest end and exits the northeast end. That's the Tay River. The guys, Matt and Tom, went to the inlet of the lake and went as far up the river as they could, probably a mile or so. Then they drifted down the river fishing for bass. As they approached the mouth of the river, which is, I think, where I had that point on the map, they were on the north shore of the river. There was a canoe with two people paddling up the river and talking, closer to the south shore of the river. As they looked at the folks in the canoe, they both saw an animal on the shore behind the canoe, observing the people in the canoe. Tom said to Matt, "Hey, Matt, check out that." And they both watched the animal walk along the bog and step up and over the bank to the marsh into the brush to disappear. I've since been on the other side of that marshy bog location. There's no way a human can or would get up there, let alone move easily. That evening, we were all sitting in the living room as usual, reflecting on the day after a few beers. I will never forget Tom saying something like, "All right, I gotta say something. I don't know what I saw, but it got up on 2 feet, walked along the shore, and went where nobody could go." As he was speaking, Harry and I was just about to take a sip, and we both stopped dead cold and said, "Oh, fuck." I just convinced myself I didn't see what I did. Harry then told what he had seen the morning before while on his walk. We were leaving the next day, and nobody bothered to check for footprints or anything. If you have been conditioned to think something doesn't exist, you don't react the way people may think. If I had a chance to go back that day, I would have been back in the woods at both ends of the lake looking for signs of footprints. It wasn't until the ride home that I really started to think about what happened. During the following week, we slowly started Googling for websites. We found the BFRO had an encounter reported from the scout camp on the same lake in the 90s. There has been a report from the cabin outside of Westport about 10 months after our encounter. I have since placed game cameras, started with 2 and up to 6 now in the area. We get great photos of deer, raccoon, porcupine, and a fisher, but no squatch. Wow. It's amazing, you know. This is so close to the sighting that we had, the report that we had. So let's hop back and have a look at this area. And this is, I believe, they were up this river and drifting down, doing their bass fishing. And this is a sighting that was reported by Patreon members. And I do believe that was in here, in and around this area, possibly, I'm not saying for sure, but possibly where that BFRO sighting took place. So, and then there was another one on this lake somewhere else, and also in Westport. So there you have it. Really, really super interesting. Is it just a coincidence? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's, these were sightings from multiple people. It's just fascinating. It really is. Let me know what you think.